uh, Wednesday the 25th of August. What is poetry? Poetry is a very broad genre of writing. Because of this, it is quite tricky to come up with one definition of what poetry actually is. Basically, poetry is a form of imaginative writing. People write poetry to express thoughts and feelings about something in a creative way. The purpose of poetry is to engage and excite the imagination of the reader, or to stir a particular emotional response within them. Poems can be long or short, funny or sad, structured or unstructured. Because of this, poets have a lot of freedom to express their thoughts and feelings in a very individual way. Poetry defined. The purpose of poetry is to engage and excite the imagination of the reader, or stir an emotional response within them. Keeping this definition in mind, revisit the 5 texts from the tuning in activity. Have you changed your mind about whether or not the text is a poem? Elements of poetry. The elements of poetry are the tools that poets use when writing poems. Some poems may contain all of these elements, whereas other poems may contain only some of them. Some of the elements of poetry include structure, rhythm, rhyme, sound devices, and figurative language. Elements of poetry. Structure. The structure of a poem refers to the way in which the lines or verses of the poem have been arranged. In some poems, the lines or verses follow a regular pattern. This is often referred to as a fixed verse. In other poems, the lines or verses don't follow a regular pattern. This is often referred to as a free verse. A fixed verse. Here is an example of a fixed verse poem about bats. Can you explain why this is an example of fixed verse? In the deep dark night, the bats will fly, past the trees and the clouds on high. In the deep dark night, the moon will glow, reflecting its light on the earth below. So it's a fixed verse poem because it follows a fixed set pattern. For example, in the first line you have in the deep dark night, and in the third line you have the same words, in the deep dark night. So it's repetitive, so it's fixed, because it's the same, it doesn't change. However, this part here, the last part of the line, rhymes. The bats will fly, the moon will, the clouds on high. See? Fly and high, they rhyme. The moon will glow, its light on the earth below. So we have glow and below. You see that? So you have all those things. A free verse. Here is an example of a free verse poem about bats. Can you explain why this is an example of free verse? At night the bats fly, wings extended, the wind soars beneath, their shadow dancing on the moon, hunting silently in darkness. So it's free verse. Now a free verse is poetry that does not rhyme or have a regular rhythm. There's no rhyming in this one, and there's no rhythm. It's what you call a free verse poem. All right? We're looking at the form now, the form of poetry. Many fixed verse poems are written in a particular form. This means they may have a set number of lines, a regular rhythm, or a distinct rhyming pattern. For example, acrostic poems, haiku, limerick, and ballad. When writing a poem in a fixed form, you must follow the pre-established rules for that particular type of poetry. More information on the various different forms of poetry can be found in the Forms of Poetry PowerPoint. Elements of poetry. Rhythm. Most poems are supposed to be read aloud. Because of this, many poems have a regular rhythm. In music, another word for rhythm is beat. In poetry, another word for rhythm is meter. When writing a poem, poets carefully choose words that create a regular rhythm when the poem is read aloud. Words create rhythm by the way they are pronounced. Some syllables are pronounced more strongly than others, or stressed. This creates a beat-like rhythm within the poem. An example. Read the poem below out loud. Aloud, the syllables in red are stressed. Can you hear the rhythm? Try clapping it with your hands. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. A rhyming poem. I'm a poet, and I didn't know it. Rhyme is the repetition of similar sounds. Usually, the last word of a line will rhyme with the last word of another line. This is called an end rhyme. The rhyming pattern of a poem describes which end words rhyme with each other. Lowercase letters are used to represent each new sound in the rhyming pattern. Although rhyme is an element of poetry, not all poems have a rhyming pattern. An example. Read the poem below aloud. Can you hear the rhythm, the rhyme pattern? The rhyme pattern of this poem is AABB. Every night at 3:30, a friendly alien visits me. He stays until the break of day, then jumps in his ship and flies away. So can you see the example there? 3, me, day, away. That's an example of an end rhyme. The words at the end of each line rhyme, especially these first two together and these last two together. Element sound devices. Sound devices. One of the tools poets use to express their thoughts and feelings about a topic is sound devices. Some of the more common sound devices used in poetry include repetition, using a word or phrase several times; alliteration, repeating a beginning sound; assonance, repeating a vowel sound; consonance, repeating a middle or end sound; onomatopoeia, words that imitate a sound. So in the next one we're going to try and find some of these. Can you find alliteration, assonance, consonance and onomatopoeia in this poem? Some examples have been included for you. Graceful as a dancer, twirling through the sky, turning, tumbling, twisting, gently floating by. Silent as a church mouse, gliding on the breeze, falling, floating, flying, drifting through the trees. Falling like a parachute, to sleep upon the eaves, waiting, watching, whispering, the ever-falling leaves. Dancing off the rooftops, to rest upon the ground, rustling, crunching, crackling, a joyous autumn sound. So in this example, you can hear the alliteration in the words where there's a repetition beginning sound. For example, turning, tumbling, yeah? And assonance, a repeat of the vowel sound. For example, eaves, and leaves. See? Eaves and leaves. Another assonance, breeze and trees. Assonance, the repeating of a vowel sound, E. Consonance, the repeating of a middle or the end sound, by, and sky. See? Sky and by. It's called a consonance. Another one, ground, over here, ground, and sound. Ground and sound, consonants. And onomatopoeia, I couldn't find any. Figurative language. Another tool poet uses to express their thoughts and feelings about a topic is figurative language. By comparing one thing to another, figurative language allows the poet to create images for the reader using words. Some figurative language commonly used in poetry includes similes, metaphors, and personification. Similes are where you make comparisons using words like or as. Similes. Metaphors is when you make comparisons by saying one thing is another. And personification is when you give human qualities to a non-human object. All right? Well, we'll carry on with poetry in the next video. Okay.